I'm Cassidy, 32 years old, and 3 days ago I walked into my stepsister's engagement party and handed my stepmother a single envelope that made her drop her champagne glass and scream in front of 45 guests. 14 years ago, my dying grandfather left me his entire savings, $220,000, because he knew exactly how my stepmother had been treating me since she married my father. He wanted to give me a chance at a real life. My stepmother intercepted that inheritance before I even knew it existed. She used every cent to pay off her own daughter's student loans and buy her a brand new car. When I finally discovered the truth years later and confronted her, she looked at me with that cold smile and said, "Your grandfather was senile. That money was meant for the family, not just you. Stop being so entitled." I was 17. I had just lost the only person who truly loved me, and I believed for years that I was the problem. But 14 years changes everything. And so does a safety deposit box key that arrived in the mail 6 months ago. Before I tell you what happened at that engagement party, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where my listeners are from. Now, let me take you back to the day my whole world started to crumble. The day my grandfather collapsed at his hardware store. The call came during third period biology. I was 16, dissecting a frog and trying not to think about how much I hated my life at home. The school secretary appeared at the classroom door. Her face told me everything before she said a word. "Cassidy, you need to come to the office. Your father is here." Dad never came to school. Not for parent-teacher conferences, not for my choir performances, not for anything. So when I saw him standing in the office, his face gray and his hands shaking, I knew. "Grandpa had a stroke," he said. "They don't think he's going to make it. We need to go now." The drive to Mercy General took 20 minutes. It felt like 20 hours. Dad didn't speak. He just gripped the steering wheel and stared straight ahead. I wanted to ask questions, but my throat had closed up completely. Grandpa Joe was my person. After my mother died when I was 6, he was the one who showed up. Every Sunday, he picked me up and took me to his hardware store. He taught me how to use a saw, how to fix a leaky faucet, how to change a tire. While my father worked 60-hour weeks and my stepmother pretended I didn't exist, Grandpa Joe made me feel like I mattered. When we got to the hospital, my stepmother Linda was already there. So was her daughter Brianna, my stepsister, who was 2 years older than me and had been making my life miserable since our parents got married when I was 8. They were sitting in the waiting room, not crying, not worried, just scrolling through their phones like they were waiting for a table at a restaurant. Dad rushed to Linda's side. She stood up and hugged him, whispering something I couldn't hear. Brianna didn't even look up. "Where is he?" I asked. "They won't let us see him yet," Linda said. She didn't look at me either. Her voice was flat, almost bored. I sat alone in the corner of that waiting room for 3 hours. No one spoke to me. No one held my hand. When the doctor finally came out, he went straight to my father. I had to push my way through to hear. "He's stable for now," the doctor said, "but the damage is significant. You should prepare yourselves." I asked. The doctor looked at my father, who looked at Linda, who sighed like I was being dramatic. "Fine," she said. "But make it quick." I walked into that hospital room and saw my grandfather lying there, tubes everywhere, machines beeping. He looked so small, so fragile. This giant of a man who had taught me everything I knew about being strong. I pulled a chair up to his bed and held his hand. His eyes fluttered open. "Cassie," he whispered. "My little Cassie." "I'm here, Grandpa. I'm not going anywhere." He squeezed my fingers weakly. "I need to tell you something." His voice was barely audible. "Important." I leaned closer. "What is it?" He struggled to form the words. "Patterson and Sons. In Portland. They have everything. Remember that name. Patterson and Sons? I don't understand." He coughed, his whole body shaking. "Don't trust her. Don't trust Linda. Promise me." "Grandpa, what are you talking about?" But his eyes had closed again. The machines started beeping faster. A nurse rushed in and pushed me aside. I was escorted back to the waiting room, my grandfather's words echoing in my head. "Don't trust Linda." Patterson and Sons in Portland. I didn't understand any of it, but I would never forget it. Grandpa Joe died 4 days later. I was at school when it happened. No one came to get me this time. I found out when I got home and saw the funeral pamphlets on the kitchen table. Linda was on the phone, already making arrangements. "Oh, you're home," she said when she saw me. "Your grandfather passed this morning. The funeral is Saturday." That was it. No hug, no comfort, just information delivered like a weather report. I went to my room and cried until I couldn't breathe. I cried for my grandfather. I cried for my mother, who I barely remembered. I cried for myself, because I knew that with Grandpa Joe gone, I was truly alone in this house. The funeral was small. Grandpa didn't have many friends left. Most of them had passed before him. I stood by the casket, looking at his face, and whispered the only promise I could make. "I'll remember, Grandpa. Patterson and Sons. I'll find out what you meant." After the service, I overheard Linda and my father in the church hallway. I was behind a pillar, invisible as always. "The lawyer called," Linda said. Her voice was hushed but excited. "There's quite a bit more than we expected." "How much?" Dad asked. She told him a number. I couldn't hear it clearly, but I saw his eyebrows shoot up. "What about the store?" "We'll sell it. It's worth at least another 50,000. She paused. "The only issue is the will. Apparently he made some changes last year." "Changes? What kind of changes?" "I don't know yet, but I'll handle it. Just keep Cassidy busy." "Keep me busy?" "Why would they need to keep me busy?" I pressed myself against the cold stone pillar, heart racing. What did Grandpa change in his will? And why was Linda so determined to handle it herself? I wanted to ask. I wanted to demand answers. But I was 16 years old. I had no money, no car, no phone of my own. My father had checked out of my life years ago, and Linda controlled everything in our house. She decided what I ate, what I wore, what activities I could do. She had convinced my father that I was difficult, troubled, acting out because I missed my mother. Every time I tried to speak up, she twisted my words until I sounded crazy. So I stayed silent. I went to my room and wrote down everything Grandpa had said. Patterson and Sons, Portland. Don't trust Linda. I hid the paper inside my pillowcase, and I waited. 2 months later, everything became horrifyingly clear. It was a Sunday dinner, one of the rare occasions when we all ate together as a family. Brianna was glowing. She had just graduated from college with $80,000 in student debt, a fact she complained about constantly. That night, she couldn't stop smiling. "So," she said, taking a dramatic pause, "Mom and Dad have some amazing news." Dad shifted uncomfortably. Linda patted his hand and beamed at Brianna. "Tell her, honey. We paid off all of Brianna's student loans," Linda announced. "Plus, we bought her a new car. A BMW. She deserves it after working so hard." I set down my fork. "I'm sorry, what?" $80,000 in loans," Linda continued, "plus $40,000 for the car. We wanted to set her up for success." I looked at my father. His eyes were fixed on his plate. $120,000? I said slowly. "Where did that money come from?" Linda's smile tightened. "That's not really your concern, Cassidy." "Actually, it is. Because 2 months ago, Grandpa died. And now suddenly, you have $120,000 to throw at Brianna? Watch your tone, young lady. What about my college? I'm a junior. I'll need money for tuition in 2 years. You'll get scholarships. Or take out loans like everyone else. But Brianna didn't have to take out loans. You just paid them off." "Brianna is my daughter," Linda said coldly. "That's different." I stared at her. Then I stared at my father. "Dad, are you seriously okay with this?" He finally looked up. "Cassidy, your stepmother is right. We need to prioritize. You're younger. You have time." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Grandpa left me something, didn't he?" I said. "That's where this money came from." The table went silent. Linda's face flickered with something. Fear? Anger? It was gone before I could identify it. "Your grandfather left his assets to the family," she said carefully. "Not to any one person." "That's a lie." The words came out before I could stop them. Before he died, he told me to find Patterson and Sons in Portland. He said they had everything. He told me not to trust you. Linda's composure cracked. She turned to my father. Do you see what I mean, David? Do you see how she is? She's delusional, paranoid. She needs help. Dad, please listen to me. Your stepmother is right, he said quietly. I think you're having a hard time processing your grief. Maybe we should look into therapy. They sent me to therapy. Not because they cared about my mental health, but because they wanted someone to tell me I was crazy. The therapist was nice enough, but she only heard what Linda told her. Troubled teenager, acting out, inventing stories about her stepmother. I tried to tell her about Patterson and Sons. She wrote it down as a grief-induced fixation. I stopped talking about it after that. I had no proof, no allies, and no power. Every time I brought up Grandpa's will, Linda accused me of being materialistic. Every time I questioned anything, my father sided with her. I was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. So I made a decision. I would survive 2 more years in that house. I would graduate high school, and then I would find Patterson and Sons myself. But here's the thing nobody tells you about being a teenager trapped in a toxic home. Time moves differently. Each day felt like a week. Each week felt like a month. I threw myself into academics, not because I cared about grades, but because it gave me a reason to stay out of the house. I joined every club. I took every AP class. I worked part-time at a grocery store and saved every penny in a shoebox under my bed. The summer before my senior year, I tried to find Patterson and Sons. I went to the public library and used their computers to search. But there was nothing. No law firm by that name in Portland. No accounting firm, no business at all. I searched for variations. Patterson Law, Sons and Patterson, Patterson Associates. Nothing. I even called information and asked for any business with Patterson in the name. The operator found 3. None of them had ever heard of my grandfather. I felt my hope crumbling. Maybe Linda was right. Maybe Grandpa had been confused. Maybe I really was chasing a fantasy. But then I remembered his eyes in that hospital room. The urgency, the clarity. He wasn't confused. He knew exactly what he was saying. So if Patterson and Sons didn't exist anymore, maybe they used to exist. Maybe they had closed down, or moved, or changed their name. I just had to keep looking. The problem was, I didn't know how. I didn't have money for a private investigator. I didn't have connections. I didn't have anyone. What I had was time, and patience, and a promise I intended to keep. I graduated high school with a 3.9 gigapascals. No one from my family came to the ceremony. Linda said they had a prior commitment, some dinner party for her book club. I walked across that stage alone, accepted my diploma, and made myself another promise. One day, I would build a life so far removed from these people that they would never be able to touch me again. I got into a state university 2 hours away. I paid for it with scholarships, grants, and 2 part-time jobs. I lived in the cheapest apartment I could find, ate ramen noodles 5 days a week, and studied until my eyes burned. I majored in business administration because I wanted to understand money, how it moved, how it was hidden, how it could be traced. I thought maybe, if I learned enough, I could figure out what happened to my grandfather's estate. I also started searching again. Every few months, I would spend a weekend digging through old records, business registrations, court documents, newspaper archives. I was looking for any mention of Patterson and Sons. For years, I found nothing. Until I did. I was 24, working my first real job as a junior analyst at a marketing firm. I had health insurance for the first time in my life. I had a car that actually ran. I had a tiny apartment that was all mine. And one random Tuesday night, I found an article from 1,987 inches, the Portland Tribune archives. Local estate attorney retires to care for ailing wife. The attorney's name was Harold Patterson. He had run a small firm called Patterson and Sons for 32 years before closing it down. The article mentioned that he had relocated to Arizona for the warmer climate. My hands were shaking as I searched for Harold Patterson in Arizona. I found an obituary from 2019. He had passed away at 89, but the obituary mentioned his son, Gerald Patterson, who had followed in his father's footsteps and become an attorney in Scottsdale. I found Gerald's law office. I found his phone number. I stared at it for an hour before I called. A receptionist answered. Patterson Legal Services, how may I help you? I explained who I was. I told her my grandfather was Joseph Brennan. I told her Harold Patterson had been his attorney. I told her I was trying to find information about his estate. There was a long pause. Hold, please, she said. 2 minutes later, a man's voice came on the line. This is Gerald Patterson. I've been hoping you would call. Gerald Patterson explained everything. His father had been my grandfather's attorney for over 40 years. When Grandpa Joe had his stroke, he had already put extensive plans in place. A will that left everything to me, his only biological grandchild. Instructions for a trust that would pay for my education. And most importantly, a safety deposit box at a bank in Portland that contained all the original documents, plus a personal letter my grandfather had written for me. The problem, Gerald said, was that my stepmother had intervened immediately after Grandpa's death. She had presented herself as the family representative. She had forged documents, suggesting I had agreed to forfeit my inheritance. By the time Gerald's father realized something was wrong, he was already battling his wife's illness and preparing to close his practice. He tried to contact me directly multiple times, Gerald continued. He sent letters to your home address. They were all returned unopened or went unanswered. Your stepmother told him you wanted nothing to do with the inheritance. She said you had emotional problems. She said you had agreed to let the family handle everything. I never received any letters, I whispered. I know that now, he said. When my father passed, I inherited all his old case files. I found your grandfather's file 6 months ago. I've been trying to track you down ever since. You're a hard woman to find, Cassidy. You never kept the same address for long. I had to keep moving, I said. Cheaper apartments, better jobs. I was building a life from scratch. Gerald was quiet for a moment. I have something for you. Something my father was supposed to deliver in person, only to you. The safety deposit box key. I mailed it to your current address last week. You should receive it any day now. The key arrived 3 days later in a plain envelope with no return address. I took a week off work. I drove to Portland. I walked into First National Bank with my ID, my grandfather's death certificate, and that small brass key. The safety deposit box contained 4 items. A copy of my grandfather's original will, notarized and witnessed, clearly naming me as his sole beneficiary. Bank statements showing his savings totaled $220,000 at the time of his death. Transfer records showing that exact amount had been moved to an account in Linda's name 2 weeks after he passed. And a letter. I sat in that bank vault and read my grandfather's words through a waterfall of tears. My dearest Cassie, if you're reading this, then you found your way despite everything working against you. I always knew you would. You're strong like your mother was. I've watched for years how Linda treats you. The way she favors her own daughter while pushing you aside. The way she's convinced your father that you're the problem. The way she's slowly erased you from your own family. It breaks my heart. I tried to talk to your father, but he doesn't see it. Or maybe he doesn't want to see it. This money is everything I have. I saved it for 40 years, penny by penny. I was going to leave it to your father, but I can't reward a man who lets his own daughter be treated like a second-class citizen in her own home. This is for you, Cassie. For your education. For your future. For the life you deserve. I've told Harold Patterson to protect this at all costs. I've told him to only give it to you, directly, in person. Don't trust Linda. She will try to take it. Be stronger than she is. Be smarter than she is. And remember, you are worthy of love, even if the people who should give it to you have forgotten how. I love you, my little Cassie. More than words can say. Grandpa Joe. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot until the sun went down. I screamed. I cried. I beat my fists against the steering wheel until my hands ached. $220,000. That was enough to have paid for my entire education. Enough for a down payment on a house. Enough to have given me a real start in life instead of years of struggling paycheck to paycheck. And Linda had taken it. She had forged documents. She had intercepted letters. She had convinced everyone I was crazy. She had stolen my grandfather's final gift and used it to benefit her own daughter. Let me pause here for a second. I know some of you are thinking, why didn't you sue them immediately? Why didn't you go to the police? Believe me, I thought about it. But Gerald had already warned me. The statute of limitations for civil recovery had long passed. Criminal charges would be nearly impossible to prove. Linda had covered her tracks well, and 14 years had buried most of the evidence. I could spend years in court and thousands in legal fees with no guarantee of ever seeing justice. Or I could wait. I could be patient. I could let karma do its work. And then, when the moment was right, I could make sure the truth came out in a way that no one could deny or dismiss. So here's my question. If you were me, would you have sued them anyway? Or would you have waited for the perfect moment? Comment 1 for sue, 2 for wait. And if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Now, let me tell you what happened over the next 4 years while I was waiting. I threw myself into my career. Junior analyst became senior analyst, became marketing director at a mid-sized firm. I bought a condo with my own money. I started a retirement account. I built a life that had nothing to do with the family that had abandoned me. I also kept tabs on them from a distance. Social media made it easy. Linda posted constantly. Brianna posted even more. I watched their lives unfold through carefully curated photos and status updates. And I watched karma do its work. Brianna's BMW got totaled in an accident 3 years after she got it. She wasn't hurt, but the insurance payout didn't cover a replacement. She had to drive a 10-year-old Honda Civic. Then she lost her job in a round of layoffs. Moved back in with Linda and my father. Her boyfriend of 4 years dumped her because he didn't want to be with someone who lived with her parents. My father's company downsized. He took an early retirement package that was smaller than expected. Linda's spending habits didn't adjust. They burned through savings. They took out a second mortgage. They sold the vacation house in Lake Tahoe that Linda had insisted they buy. Then they sold the boat. Then the RV. Then Linda's jewelry collection. By the time Brianna got engaged last year, they were living in a modest rental and drowning in credit card debt. That's when I got the call. A number I hadn't seen in 8 years. Cassidy? It's your father. My grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? He cleared his throat awkwardly. Linda and I were hoping you might come to Brianna's engagement party next month. It would mean a lot to have the whole family together. The whole family. I almost laughed. Why? Well, he hesitated. Brianna's fiancé comes from a good family. They're throwing a big party. We want to make a good impression. And we were hoping we could host a small gathering here first. Introduce everyone. What does this have to do with me? The thing is, Linda continued, she must have been listening on speaker. We've seen your Facebook. You've done so well for yourself. That beautiful condo. That nice job. We thought maybe you could help us out a little. Just until we get back on our feet. There it was. After 8 years of silence, after treating me like I didn't exist, after stealing my inheritance and gaslighting me into thinking I was crazy, they wanted my money. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to tell them exactly where they could shove their engagement party. But instead, I took a breath. I thought about that safety deposit box. I thought about my grandfather's letter. I thought about 14 years of waiting. When is the party? I asked. June 15th, Linda said eagerly. 2 p.m. at the community center. Brianna wants something elegant. I'll be there, I said. And then I hung up. I spent the next month preparing. I made copies of every document, the will, the bank records, the transfer statements, the letter. I organized them into a presentation folder, professional and undeniable. I contacted Gerald Patterson and asked him to write a statement confirming everything. He did better than that. He offered to attend the party himself. He wanted to see justice done for his father's client. I bought a new dress. Something elegant but strong. Something that said, I don't need you, but I'm here anyway. I practiced what I would say until the words felt natural, And then June 15th arrived. The community center was decorated with white flowers and silver balloons. Brianna's engagement theme was Winter Wonderland in June. There was an ice sculpture shaped like two hearts. There was a chocolate fountain. There were 45 guests milling around in cocktail attire, drinking champagne and making small talk. I saw Linda immediately. She was holding court near the entrance, greeting people with that fake warmth she had perfected over decades. When she saw me, her face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, calculation, and then that practiced smile. "Cassidy, you actually came." I kissed the air near her cheek. I wouldn't miss it. She looked me up and down, taking in my designer dress, my confident posture, everything about me that screamed success. "You look well," she said. It almost sounded like an accusation. Brianna found me 20 minutes later. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost more than they could afford. Her fiancé, Kevin, trailed behind her like an accessory. "Cassidy, how nice of you to show up." "Congratulations on your engagement," I said. "Thank you." She paused, clearly debating whether to say something else. "Look, I know we haven't always been close, but Kevin's family is really important. His mother is a judge. His father owns a chain of car dealerships, so please don't make a scene." "Why would I make a scene?" "Just," she waved her hand vaguely, "be normal." I smiled. "I'm always normal, Brianna." The party continued. I circulated, made small talk, played the role of the supportive stepsister. And then, about an hour in, Linda clinked her champagne glass. "Everyone, can I have your attention, please?" The crowd quieted. Linda stood at the front of the room, my father beside her. Kevin's parents stood nearby, looking appropriately distinguished. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Brianna and Kevin," Linda began. "We're so thrilled to welcome Kevin into our family." She launched into a speech about love and commitment and new beginnings. I barely heard it. I was watching, waiting, and then she said it, the thing I knew she would say. "Of course, as many of you know, David and I have faced some challenges recently, but that's what family is for, right? We support each other through thick and thin." She looked directly at me, her smile sharp. "Which is why we're so grateful to have Cassidy here today, my successful stepdaughter, who I'm sure will be generous in helping us navigate this difficult time." The crowd turned to look at me. Some faces were curious, others expectant. Linda had set me up. She had announced my supposed generosity in front of everyone, making refusal nearly impossible. It was the same manipulation she had used my entire life. This time, I was ready. "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "since we're making announcements in front of family and friends, I have one of my own." I pulled the folder from my bag. Linda's smile faltered. "The truth," I said, "something that's been hidden for 14 years. I turned to face the crowd. When I was 16, my grandfather passed away. He was the only person in my family who ever truly cared about me. He left me his entire life savings, $220,000, in a trust intended to pay for my education and give me a start in life." Murmurs rippled through the room. "But I never received that money," I continued, "because my stepmother intercepted it. She forged documents claiming I had agreed to forfeit my inheritance. She used those funds to pay off Brianna's student loans and buy her a BMW. Linda's face went white. "That's ridiculous. You can't prove I handed the folder to Kevin's mother, the judge." Page 1 is a copy of my grandfather's original will, notarized and witnessed, clearly naming me as his sole beneficiary. The judge opened the folder. Her eyebrows rose as she read. Page 2 is the bank statement showing his savings at the time of his death. Page 3 is the transfer record showing that exact amount going into my stepmother's personal account 2 weeks after he passed. "That's fabricated," Linda stammered. "Those documents are fake." "Actually," a voice came from behind me, "they're completely authentic." Gerald Patterson stepped forward. He was in his 60s, distinguished, and radiating the authority of 30 years in estate law. "I'm Gerald Patterson. My father was Harold Patterson, the attorney who drafted Joseph Brennan's will. I have complete records of all transactions. Mrs. Brennan," he looked at Linda, Forged my father's signature on documents claiming Cassidy had waived her inheritance. That's fraud. Potentially criminal fraud. The room erupted. Kevin's mother was flipping through the folder, her judicial instincts clearly engaged. Kevin's father was staring at Linda and my father with undisguised contempt. She grabbed the folder from her future mother-in-law and started reading frantically. "This isn't true," she said. Her voice was rising. "Mom, tell them this isn't true." Linda's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. I pulled out one final document. "And this," I said, "is a cease and desist letter. Any further contact from any of you will be documented and reported to the appropriate authorities. I've also retained counsel to explore our legal options." My father finally spoke. "Cassidy, please. We can explain." "There's nothing to explain, Dad. You let this woman steal from your own daughter. You let her gaslight me for years. You chose her over me every single time." I kept my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. "Grandpa saw exactly who you all were. That's why he left everything to me and nothing to you." Brianna turned on her mother. "You told me that money came from savings. You told me Grandpa didn't leave anything specific. You lied to me." "I did it for you," Linda sputtered. "Everything I did was for you." Kevin's mother closed the folder. She looked at Kevin with an expression I couldn't read. "Kevin, we need to talk. Now." She guided him toward the exit. Brianna called after them, but they didn't look back. The party dissolved into chaos. Guests whispered to each other. Some left immediately. Others stood frozen, watching the family implode. I stood in the middle of it all, feeling something I hadn't felt in 14 years. Peace. I walked outside. The June sun was warm on my face. I stood in the parking lot and breathed. Behind me, I could hear Linda crying. I could hear Brianna screaming at her. I could hear my father's useless attempts to calm everyone down. Footsteps approached. Gerald Patterson stood beside me. "You did well," he said. "Your grandfather would be proud." "I hope so," I whispered. "Do you regret it? Exposing them like that?" I thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it was necessary." But the truth needed to come out. I spent 14 years being told I was crazy, being told I was ungrateful, being told I didn't deserve anything. She nodded. "And now? Now they know that I know. Everyone knows. That's worth more than the money ever was." The aftermath came in waves. Kevin broke off the engagement 3 days later. His mother couldn't overlook what she had witnessed. Brianna moved out of my father's house. Last I heard, she was living with a friend and barely speaking to Linda. My father called me twice. I didn't answer. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. Gerald helped me file a complaint with the State Bar Association regarding the forged documents. We also reported the fraud to the police. They said criminal charges were unlikely after so many years, but the investigation would create a permanent record. Linda would have to live with that hanging over her. But here's the thing. I didn't do any of this for revenge. I did it for truth, for closure, for the grandfather who tried to protect me even after death, and for the 16-year-old girl who spent years believing she was the problem. I donated $22,000 to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. I named it after my grandfather, the Joseph Brennan Memorial Scholarship. Every year, it will help someone like me, someone who has to build their future alone, because the people who should have helped them chose not to. I talk to my grandfather sometimes. Is that strange? Probably. But I think he'd understand. I keep his photo on my bookshelf, the one from his hardware store, him in his work apron, grinning at the camera. I tell him about my life, my job, my friends, the life I built from nothing. "I kept my promise, Grandpa," I say to the photo. "I found Patterson and Sons. I found the truth, and I didn't let her win." A lot of people ask me if I feel guilty, if I regret ruining my stepsister's engagement party. The answer is no. I didn't ruin anything. Linda ruined it 14 years ago when she decided to steal from a grieving teenager. I simply told the truth. There's no shame in that. 6 months have passed since that engagement party. I'm standing in my living room now, looking at the view from my condo. I worked hard for this view. I worked hard for everything I have, and that makes it more valuable than anything that could have been handed to me. My grandfather taught me that. Not through the money he tried to give me, but through the lesson he tried to teach me. Your worth is not determined by how your family treats you, it's determined by how you treat yourself. I finally understand that now. Last Thanksgiving was different. I hosted dinner at my place. Not for the family I was born into, but for the family I chose. My best friend from college and her husband, Gerald Patterson and his wife. A few colleagues who had become true friends. We sat around my dining table, passing dishes and telling stories, and I realized something. This was home. Not a place, but these people. The ones who showed up. The ones who stayed. The ones who loved me the right way. Gerald raised his glass. To Joe, he said, who always knew Cassidy was the strong one. To Grandpa, I echoed. After dinner, I stood at my window and looked at the city lights. I thought about my mother, who I barely remembered. I thought about my grandfather, who I would never forget. I thought about the scared 16-year-old, who cried herself to sleep, wondering what she had done wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. She was just unlucky enough to be born into a family that didn't know how to love her. But she was also strong enough to build a new one. That's the lesson I want to leave you with. Family is not an excuse for cruelty. Blood is not a free pass to treat someone like they don't matter. And you are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they share your last name. You are allowed to tell the truth, even if it makes people uncomfortable. You are allowed to demand better. Because you deserve better. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. Your support means more than you know. Now let me leave you with one final question. What would you have done differently? Would you have exposed them sooner? Would you have let it go entirely? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Waited until the moment was right? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this about family, betrayal, and finding your own justice, hit that subscribe button and check out the video I've linked in the description. I think you'll love it. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, you are worth more than how anyone treats you. Always.